Good evening to everybody in Europe and good morning to our friends in America. And anyhow, a nice day to everybody who has joined us from all around the world. My name is Florian, and in the name of the Young Proteomics Investigators Club, I am happy to open this next webinar in our webinar series. First, I'd like to introduce ourselves. The Young Proteomics Investigators Club is a group of young scientists within the European Proteomics Association. And we are trying to build a platform to provide other young researchers, not only with the hard skills, but also with the soft skills that are required for a scientific career. And as such, we are providing our webinar series that is not based on proteomic sciences, but on everything else, basically, that you need to survive. So let's come to the main part and why you're all here. The webinar from Professor van Eyck about ins and outs of collaborative science. And I think Professor van Eyck doesn't need a lot of introduction. She's quite a big name in the field of proteomics and especially in the clinical proteomics and translational sciences. You can see here that she's a professor of medicine at the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in LA. She's the director of basic research for the Barbara Streisand's Women Heart Center, and she's the director of the Advanced Clinical Biosystems Research Institute. Apart from that, she has always been a strong supporter of young scientists, and she's just told us a few minutes ago that she has now established for the HUPO US also a young researcher association. So with that, Professor van Eyck, we're super happy that you're helping us out here, and we're looking forward to your talk. The stage is yours. Please share your screen.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here, and it's always my pleasure to be involved in these types of discussions. We were just talking before the session today that when I started my career as mentors, that word was not applied ever in the academic world. It was on the medical science, medical side, but not in the academic side. And so I wish I had groups like the ECR to help me along the way. And maybe I would not quite have made as many mistakes along the way, or maybe not as many tears if I'd had them. So sorry, I'm sitting outside, so if it gets too noisy, please let me know. So let's move on. We're going to talk about collaborations and their need. Okay, so we're going to start and cover, I hope, the following topics. First is, what is a collaboration, at least in my view. Everyone, of course, is going to have a different viewpoint on that. Why collaboration is so important. I think it's fundamental to a science career. And how do you make your own collaborative team? And also, how do you make an external collaborating team? And what do you do when it fails? And it does fail. Collaborations do fall apart, and they mature and also grow and change over time. And then finally, what is success? And I can tell you what I consider to be success and give you some examples. Okay, so I think the biggest thing about collaboration is that it's really a journey about knowing yourself. Yes, you're collaborating with other people in your team, you're collaborating with other labs, but the journey of collaboration is really learning about yourself and how you respond to the scientific world around you. And that's why it's a journey. And I think for me, the fundamental parts of it is understanding the question that you're going after, your passion, what you care about, what approaches you need to bring on, what skills. But it's really these last two parts that really deal most with collaboration, is your personality and how you view life and how you view fairness and equitability among yourself and your collaborators. And then perseverance. Always science is about perseverance and getting through the difficult times because you believe in your question and believe in your team that's around you. So what I've learned, most people may or may not know, but I'm from Canada and from many small little towns when I was growing up. And the probability of me being an academic person living in Los Angeles, if you'd known me as a child, would have been an impossibility. But of course, life takes you where life takes you. And I think that's what's so remarkable about science and having a career in science. So it doesn't really matter where you come from, but rather who you are and what you do. You have to really stand on your own merits. And part of standing on your own merits is really around your collaborations. And the collaborations that you hold reflect who you are and as I said, your perspective of the world, and therefore they will evolve and change over time. And I think, to me, when we talk about collaboration, it has to be this journey about yourself growing, but more importantly, you growing and providing strength to the people around you. Even though this is saying it's about you, about me, it is really about the team and the people around you. So this is my background. This is the people I trained with: Bob Hodges out of the University of Alberta in Canada, Casper Ruegg, who was a physiologist. I won my PhD training. Was in Germany. Very unconventional postdoc training. And then John Solero was my second postdoc I did in Chicago in the US. And to me, that was my first time I went to a big, scary US city, was with John. And each one I learned something completely different. Each one, I would say, has and remains to influence how I deal with my collaborations and how I deal with the people within my lab and within my working group. And each one of them taught me a lot about science, but also about how to think about life and how to think about the realities of science and the science we work. So Bob was a remarkable scientist, and his viewpoint on people in his lab was, you could become whatever. I was a technician with him for 5 years before I did my PhD. I had multiple papers. I was going to meetings, and his belief was, you bring out the best in people, and it doesn't matter what your degree is. If you have a technician who is really good and wants to lead projects, you let them and you support them. And I still firmly believe in that. Casper gave me my love for physiology. I was trained as a protein biochemist, a peptide chemist, a synthetic chemist with Bob. Casper gave me my reality check on physiology. And then John Solero is the person I transitioned to the heart, which is my passion. Heart disease is the #1 killer in the world. And John, I went to learn also how to be a good mentor, how to lead a department, how to transition to become a leader. And he not only gave me cardiology, but he also gave me that. And I do not collaborate with any of these individuals. Casper actually has passed away, but they are my foundation. And I think you pick up those good things along your route. But I also believe you have to pay forward. And this, again, focusing on part of the collaboration, these individuals, other than Eduardo, I have not collaborated with. But each one of them was fundamental to my growth and my outview. And each one of them paid forward with me, saying that they helped me along my way, even though there was no reason for them to do it. It wasn't like I was working for them, doing anything. And I think that also has influenced me in my belief in collaborations, mentorship, and facilitators, is that we need to help others. I think science is super hard to do. I think what we're doing is hard. I think it asks a lot of us on a personal level. And so we better make it easy for each other and help each other and be supportive and kind. And that drives my underlying belief in collaborations locally and externally, that science is hard. And if we really believe science is going to change the world, what we do changes the world, then we need to be able to do collaborations. So to me, collaborations are part of this whole ecosystem about who you are. But a collaboration is much more focused, and it's much more product driven, meaning it is about getting a project done and about getting something accomplished. And so this other part, collaboration, sits in it, but it's about really creating an ecosystem around yourself, around what you believe and how you want to deal with other people. So what is a collaboration and why does it evolve? So as a trainee, you might interact with your lab mate because they have a technology or they know more than you do about something that you need to be able to do your science. But as you mature and move to a group leader or to become a PI, your collaborations change, and they change to involve something differently. Just like a collaboration goes from a group or an individual, your lab mate, to grow to collaborate with other labs or other companies. And so there's this evolution. But the fundamental difference is a collaboration is working with someone or a group in order to create or produce a product. And that may sound very much like a company or a business, But science is a business. Science is, we're all little entrepreneurs. We're all like small businesses, no matter how big or small your lab is. Doesn't matter if you are a part of a group, that is like a small business. You have cash flow, you have to produce a product. And it's not wrong to think about science in those contexts and to use the long history of understanding about collaborations in business to help you in your understanding how collaborations can work in science. I know in science in our lab, it often feels like it's our family. We see them so often, but yet we can't forget that it really still is like a business. We still have responsibilities like that. So why collaboration? Well, success is that, in fact, we should improve efficiency. We should be able to get to the product, be it a paper, be it finishing a set of experiments more efficiently, produce a more improved product, meaning more brains around something can help you make a better experiment. But there's another part too, is it does build community and it does build self-worth in the context to this. So the elements of collaboration to me is cooperation, assertiveness, and you may think, really assertiveness? But it does. Autonomy, responsibility, and accountability, communication, coordination, and mutual trust and respect. That is why collaborations don't always work well. Sometimes they don't work well, and sometimes they do work incredibly well. And what I learned early on, and I still believe it, is that when you have a collaboration, a good collaboration, it is a leap. It is a boost. It creates something that could not be created otherwise. When you have a bad collaboration, it can take down everything. It can totally destroy a project, totally destroy a lab, and cause all kinds of harm. So good collaborations are a gift. Bad collaborations you have to figure out, try to correct, and if it can't be corrected, no matter how sad, or what you think the consequences are, they need to be terminated. So collaborations have an emotional part to them, but you also have to be able to disconnect that and realize that it is about producing a product. At least that helps me, because there are friends that you gather along your career, and that's not necessarily a collaborator. A collaboration is almost more about a contract, but that makes it a bit shallow, because of course not. Collaborations build friendships, collaboration brings ideas, and that's all part of it. But there's also this other part that kind of can help you when it gets difficult to bring it back to this other level. So why do you need to have collaborations? I believe, like I said, they improve efficiency, they improve all parts of your life. And I think they really help your dreams to come true. So I dream big. I have way too many dreams, but there is some fundamental dreams I have that I'll share to you. One is that I believe science changes lives. And I think every science experiment that we do, and this was true when I was a graduate student, when I was a technician, and it's true now when I lead the research institute, is that our projects have to change lives ultimately. And it doesn't mean they have to tomorrow, but they have to be on that route towards changing lives. And that means if we're going to do really great research, we always have to ask, why are we doing it? And for me and for my group, if that answer isn't to ultimately improve patient lives, then we have to go back to the drawing board. Now, that means we do some really basic research and some really basic technology development, but it's always linked to this reason why we're doing it. And I'll show you an example at the end if we have time. So again, collaborations can help you make those dreams come true, because no one can do science by itself and actually move very forward. But it also means that as a collaborator, that you have to also make dreams of other people come true. And that's the collaboration part, is you're using people to help your dreams go forward, but equally you have to help them get their success, what they want, and their dreams to come true. And that's the journey, right? So my dream, as I said, is around making patients' lives better, to give physicians better tools. And so over years, I've come up kind of with two aspects that we've been dealing in. One is around diagnostics, and the other side is really about now more around therapeutics. Not to say we haven't done basic research on mechanism for years, of course. That's how you fund grants. You don't fund grants on biomarkers so much, but you fund it on mechanism. So even though we've been doing that, the concept now that we're evolving, which is individualized therapy, and we'll talk that about at the end, really we focused a lot about precision diagnostics. And I think it's clear there's a growing need for new approaches in precision health. People talk about it, it's a sexy word these days, but it always comes down to how good are your biochemical assays. And that's why we do mass spectrometry for a lot of stuff. We do immunoassays too, but mass spectrometry allows us this breadth and accuracy and ability to move things forward. And there's this word telehealth. This telehealth is a big deal right now in the US with COVID-19. That's when you do offsite conversations with your physician. And we're trying to move self-sampling, like blood sampling. Patients do their own sampling, and moving it to a clinical lab could really change the focus. So that's where we've been focused on. This is the conceptual ideas that have been growing out of generation or a long time. And in that, we can't do it alone. We have a huge, massive collaborative teams within our group and outside our group to bring this vision together. But the vision is a vision that has grown, and everyone in our lab adds to that vision. So how do you build your own collaborative teams? Well, I can tell you there's no straightforward answer. Each team is different because people are different, right? But there are some kind of tricks, at least I found. And like I said, I wish someone had told me these tricks when I was growing up. Most of them I found out by making mistakes and falling into those potholes of life and then figuring out how to get out of them. So collaboration goes from having individual tasks to being able to build something and then being able to create something. That was my attempt to make a sandcastle, which looks kind of weird. But so what you want to be able to do at your own collaborative team is to maximize the task or the skill set of each individual and put them together to build something quicker. And what that means is you need to be able to first focus on a common goal. You have to all agree that this is worthwhile. And people will, sometimes they don't have to do so much. They don't have to totally buy into the common goal, but they're going to do it. And sometimes they have to make a vested interest. So you have to come up with your common goal, and that's taking everybody's view, whether or not that's doing some experiments to finish a paper, whether or not it's to build a new platform, whatever it is. So you have to maximize the skills and the members and create and very much almost write out what everyone's responsible for. Then someone has to drive and put all those parts together. There has to be a leader. And that's why it's your team, right? And that means everyone has to be on the same page. You have to maximize task to skill, provide success for each person. So you have to understand what's the motivation of each individual, and you have to communicate. You have to find the best way to communicate, be it emails, be it buying coffee for them, and meeting over coffee, whatever it is, you need to maximize your communication, because it's really through communication that trust is built, transparency, and learning those skills. Really, you grow them over time. Because as I said, each person's different. And, I've had a lot of people come through my lab, and most of the time I understand what a personality's like. But, even now I still get fooled, and there are people that I think I understand what motivates them, and I'm wrong. And so you're always learning how to deal with situations and how to bring out the best in an individual. And that's really the leader's team. And that doesn't matter if you're a graduate student and you're trying to get help from someone. You become that leader of your collaborative team, even if it's just you and your lab mate. And you need to make sure that they know what success is. So part of that is around emotional intelligence and empathy. And I think for myself, this is one of my strong points. This is one of my strong characteristics. I'm very empathetic, maybe too empathetic. I've been told that multiple times, too empathetic. But emotional intelligence, this is meaning that you're able to identify and manage your own emotions, but more importantly, to recognize emotions in others and react appropriately. And part of that is helps you to understand the motivation for each individual, and when things are wrong and when they need emotional help, or support while they're doing their science. Science, you know, this is a job. As a graduate student, I've always looked at my science as a job. I mean, I had a job when I was a graduate student, when I was a technician, as an assistant professor. I have a job when I'm collaborating with a company. These are jobs, but yet you still need to bring out the best. So what some traits you need to kind of cultivate, because you can be born with an inherent ability to be more emotionally intelligent, but you still have to build those skills, right? So, and you also need to be able to build those skills and learn how to control your own emotions, right? So being able to recognize and detach from strong emotions. So I have cried with many people who've come into my lab who've had hard things that have happened to them, of course. But being able to step away and bring wisdom, both to your own life when things are happening, but also to others, can be helpful. Resilience always. I think these are the hard ones, though, being not being offended easily. We'll all get offended, of course. But stepping back and seeing it from the other side is really important. For me, the hard one was not taking criticism personally. There's reasons why I take criticism too personally, and but I still learn how to address that and to make sure it does not influence my response to people. And of course, when you get back a rejection of a paper or a grant and there's some snide comment in it, of course it hurts. How can it not? We're people. But that doesn't mean you try to figure out who wrote those. It doesn't matter. It's a report. You have to respond to it. And yeah, maybe you might write out an email that you never send because it's not very nice. But you try not to take criticism personally. And especially you do not confront someone about a criticism. It is a learning experience. And those, for me, this was probably the hardest lesson for me to learn, is that it's not personal. It is about science, and you have to just deal with it as if it's as if you're a professional. However, that doesn't mean you're not empathetic, and doesn't mean you don't have compassion. And I think compassion in science is really needed to understand and to provide environments. So, I'm now a professor. I run an institute, almost essentially 2 institutes, and you could say that's success. But I would say the reason I got into it, I didn't want to do this. That was not my goal to become a professor when I was a graduate student. My goal was to do the best science. I love science. I love doing science. I love what science can bring and change the world around us. But there was something else, and that was to create an environment where people treat each other with being civil, where people support each other. And that is because I do not do well with conflict. My lab will also tell you that. I had to learn a lot of skills to be able to do conflict resolution because I find that very hard. And again, there's lots of reasons why. And maybe for you, it's not a problem. It is a skill set, just like compassion. If you're not a super compassionate person, you can learn to be more compassionate, to put yourself in someone else's shoes. So depending on what your own personal strengths are, you learn and support those things that you're weak in. It's the same thing when my first faculty position was in the Department of Physiology. I was thrilled because physiology was not my strength. Protein biochemistry was my strength. I could do it. Going to the Department of Physiology surrounded me with the strength of physiology, and that strengthened my science immeasurably more than if I'd gone to a biochemistry department, because I was forced to be able to interact with physiologists and understand and to teach it and to understand it. And that was the same thing. So surrounding yourself with people that are going to provide you with the strength, working on those things that you're weak at makes you stronger, not just building your strengths, but building where you're weak. That also took me a while to figure out. So let's talk about some things that could happen. So irritability, someone in your lab's really irritable, or yourself, me. I have apologized to my lab saying, I'm having such a bad day. I'm so sorry. I'm being very irritable today. And it's just one of those days. So just either we'll talk tomorrow or just I'll try to calm down and not be irritable. But sometimes that happens. And sometimes it just needs that someone around you needs to have rest. We're all pushed, and certainly with COVID-19, there are additional stresses, or maybe they just need assistance because they're just having too much to have to do, too much to handle, and they just need a helping hand. So irritability is something to recognize as a sign that they might need help. Perceived laziness or stubbornness. Sometimes that just means they have a larger issue, or there's a diversity problem that we're not saying the right words. The word that you're saying means something different to a different individual. So perceptions become really important part of this emotional intelligence. There's always two sides to every story. So what kind of skills do you need to create your own little team, your own cooperative team? I can't stress communication enough. And withholding information because you're embarrassed by it, or you kind of think, oh, I did it again. Yeah, just admit it. Don't withhold any information. Transparency in your team. You have to trust your team enough, your collaborative team, your local team, to be able to do that. Reaching a consensus around goals and methods is important. We write down what we're going to do, or I get my trainees to write down what they're going to do, pass it around, try to make it better. That helps us to address any obstacle. I always say my job is to give you your resources, to make sure that you have the resources on hand to be able to do your job, to be able to do your science, and that includes experts around you, it includes resources, it includes mass spectrometers, it includes lots of things, but you have to identify what those are. This is the other one that some individuals have time, is placing that group goals, whatever that collaborative group, whether or not it's running a gel, whether or not it's running some mass spec, whether or not it's a whole project, putting that goal above your own personal satisfaction and recognition is important, especially if you're the leader. As a leader, which remember, that can be you as a graduate student, because you're the leader because you're trying to get this paper done, right? Doesn't mean it's your PI, but it's all in different contexts, right? But as a leader, you have to create the team where you recognize the contributions of the others and always give credit where credit's due. That makes you look better than ever taking credit on yourself. My lab does amazing work, not because of me, but because we have an amazing group of scientists who believe in a mission of changing science and medicine. And they work really hard and make teams within it to be able to do that. It is absolutely okay to apologize for missteps and to forgive others for mistakes. It is better to say, I am sorry, I goofed up. Or, yeah, that was a mistake, in the data analysis. Thank goodness you caught it before we published it. I mean, all of these things are okay. We're all human. Science is hard. And don't be afraid to apologize for missteps or to point out where there could be issues, identifying obstacles. So conflict resolution, not my strength, although I do it and I do it quite well. It's just, I find it hard. And what helps me to get through it is two parts. One is recognizing there's always multiple sides to every perspective, to every conflict. And the second one, which I would say I struggle with, is for some individuals, they're not made to do a task. You thought they could do a task, but you were wrong. The task is not correct for them. You're trying to fit them into a round hole when they're a square peg, and allowing them to move to a situation where it's a square peg will allow them to be successful. And understanding that sometimes you have to close a door in order to open the door for them is really important, and probably was one of the hardest things I learned. So conflict resolution skill, you could have a whole hours and hours of talks about how to do this well and to do it professionally. But I think for me, it is about two aspects. It's this balance between talking and listening. Really important to listen without judgment and to listen. But there is part of that, an accountability. And that's why on these collaborations, kind of almost having a contract, not written contract, but a goal that allows you to have an accountability. But you have to be empathetic because you don't know what's going on in their life or the reasons why this is happening. And then you have to just be super creative and problem solving. And I think bringing these together has helped me to be able to do conflict when it arises. Usually it's about communication and not understanding what's needed. I have very rarely found malice if ever, in anyone around conflict. But there are times that I will not collaborate. If for all of a sudden, if a PI ever was to yell at a graduate student in my lab, the collaborations probably would be very hard to resolve. You don't act that way. You can be frustrated, you can get upset, but you don't yell or shout. To me, that's my line in the sand. So that's one part, right? How to build. So why would you want to do it? So I think as you grow in your career, you have a vision, you evolve your vision, you want to spread your vision. And to do that, you need your collaborative networks. So as you build bigger and bigger networks, going from your lab mate to a group within your lab, to having a collaborator from another lab, to being able to move out, to being able to get a bigger and bigger network. So why do you want to build your network? Because you want to do more. For me, I wanted to build a network because I have really big dreams about changing medicine and about using remote sampling devices, having assays that we can quickly get to the clinic, to really be at that place where the road and the tires hit the road in clinical medicine. And I also recognize, however, biology is super complicated. So the data we have to get, sorry, my husband just let the dog out and scared me, so I jumped, is really super important in being able to do that. So to be able to bring all this together meant that I had to be able to bring lots of different people together, different labs, different clinicians, different industries, to not just deal with today, but to be thinking 5 years down the road. So this is our goal. It's to be able to really shift to a new diagnostic paradigm, going from one disease to holistic, going from one marker to a mechanistic network, going from one time point to longitudinal tracking, and then to move that into a healthcare system, which is around telehealth, and really the next generation of medical practice. One lab cannot do this. 2 labs can't do this. It takes a community, and that's where collaboration, local within the US, to me, within Europe, across the world, becomes really important. So we want to go from one marker to really capturing this mechanistic network. I know lots of people talk about that, but when you talk about the actual implementation, every little part of it, it is many collaborations in order to pull this together. That's the fun part. So we're going from, and what choice of assays you do, the expertise required from going from discovery to actually making a targeted assay to actually making one that goes into the clinic is a whole world. Moving from having to take a blood sample, for example, when you're getting a vaccine for COVID-19, to doing remote sampling, all of these technologies had to be built. The pipelines had to be built. They have to be robust, not high profile papers, but fundamental building of processes. This is not necessarily what academics do, but if you have a vision, you have to pull these things together. But one of the big ones that I have dealt with was this whole problem of from discovery to actually making a translational assay, and doing it quickly. So our one of our big assays now, it comes out of work we did at Hopkins. It's around traumatic brain injury. It's now in going through a multi-site clinical trial for the FDA here in the US. It is 8 years of work. A company took it, a huge amount of effort from their part, from their teams. I'm actually not so much involved in it anymore, but it took so much money, so long, and it's only one area. So we want to come up with a way to get around. How did you do that? Like if you truly believe you're supposed to make diagnostics get to the clinic, you can't just do part of it. So how do you do that? So this bred this idea of the precision biomarker labs. It's 3 labs into one, so that we can just really transform what's going on. So it's a little bit maybe premature, but not. This is the Cedars-Sinai Precision Biomarker Labs. This is the building we're in. We have the top floor. It's 16,000 square feet. You can imagine the size of that. It's huge. It's 3 labs, a CRO, a translational lab to make the biomarkers, and a CAP-CLIA certified lab for the clinical chemistry. This was a dream. Started probably 6, 7, 8 years ago. We just moved in about several months ago. It's very business oriented. We have a business strategy person, Susan Marcus, who has come in from Jackson Labs, well known for their mice, but they also have a diagnostic clinic. Corey Bryston, who is well known in the US for building clinical assays that are protein-based, mass spectrometry-based, to be part of this translational really trying to change the biomarker field in order to do it. One of the reasons I moved from Hopkins to Cedars-Sinai was part of this vision. It was kind of a part 2. So again, mainly because it's a whole bunch of different technologies. We work with Anders Berg in the clinical chemistry department, Kimia Sobani as well, to be able to go across it. But it is really an enterprise across the whole Cedars-Sinai healthcare system, which is both the hospitals, there's multiple hospitals, as well as the multiple clinics out into the neighborhoods. And behind it, we're trying to make the technology work. This is my dream. Collaborations are massive. And what we have to be able to do from the clinical side has pushed all the way down to the discovery to have the same robustness of development. This is not a game. This is very serious. And that's the part, you know, about collaborations. So I'm almost done. I do want to talk just a little bit about how you build these external collaborations, right? We've spent a lot of time about internal ones closest to you. So again, I want to say that collaboration is not the same as providing a service. So, you know, you're running some samples for another lab. That may just be running samples for another lab. There is no collaboration. You have a technology, you're running it. Not to say you're not nice, you don't help them, of course. Collaboration, I think, is when you give part of your intellect and soul to a project, where you put effort, that intellectual effort into it. A collaborator is also not the same as a friend. Here are showing some people who've influenced me over life. Some of them are from different companies. There's Christy Hunter and Brad and Steve, who I sat on a flight beside. He's from Agilent, flying across from Europe back to the US. And we talked about what does it mean to be a mentor. Almost the whole way, we became friends, and we have a project with Agilent. Christy and I have known each other from SciEx for a long time, but there's also friends who I've collaborated with for years. This is Anne Murphy, for example, Hel Dietz. Then there's friends who are just friends. We don't collaborate very often together. And other ones we do. And people who are coming from industry, this is Donna, who does Brain Box Solution, who took our first IP, or Ian, who told me how to move from an academic to structure a research institute where it's much more like business. Each person is different. Collaborations are around long-term relationships, but you can go from a friend to a collaborator to a friend, to doing service for someone. Is building this network and recognizing that all relationships are not the same and they are governed by different rules will help you along the way not to have as many heartbreaks. But I do think collaborators and colleagues, you have to trust them to be doing good and transparent work, that you have clear responsibilities. Some of them can evolve during a project, and you have to be able to communicate easily. So this is my current list of people that normally this was my last talk. This is my group up here in the box, the Precision Biomarker Lab, and all the collaborations, both in industry and for these particular projects, which I was talking about, the California Institute of Precision Medicine and the Center for Undiagnosed Patients. This is my group, right? And every single one of them means something. And this is only a very small percentage of the people that I work with. Our lab probably has 50 collaborations going on at any one time. All of them cannot come from me. Each person has their own collaborative group and working with them. So I believe external collaborations are absolutely critical, both with industry as well as other scientists. Some of them are around biology, clinical, as well as technology. And all of those have different cultures, and you have to understand them. And it's your responsibility to be able to work directly with all of these types of individuals. It means you have to understand where they're coming from. It's also your responsibility to ensure that you're part of the collaboration. Your data is the best. You're transparent about it. And if there's a problem with it, you talk about it. It's okay. Because what I can tell you, probably my biggest heartbreaks are that once trust is lost in a collaboration, it is very hard to regain, if possible, to regain it. So you go into a collaboration often trusting, and if something happens that you lose that trust, those are the sadness. Okay, so choose your collaborators wisely. This is one of my great groups. It's wonderful. It's around ALS, and it's there's actually 6 labs, so 5 well-known scientists plus us working to find a cure for ALS. And this is just a fantastic group. Phenomenal people who support it. It's not NIH supported. It's funded by foundations who come together It involves patients who have ALS, just a phenomenal, but we do our small bit to it, and really Jeff Rothstein and Clive Svensson are the drivers, and this is really a remarkable collaboration. This is another one. This is Corelli. This is around COVID-19. It's a huge collaboration out of Cedars-Sinai with Susan and Jane. We're now pushing to get the vaccine, where we're collecting samples from our from the healthcare workers so we can track long-term outcomes, linking up with the COVID-19 post-clinical group that's been started, driving research, driving funding, massive collaborations to really try to make sure that people who have COVID-19 or have had it, even if you're asymptomatic, will not have heart issues, or if we can collect those and acknowledge them quickly. So I keep dreaming. I want to change the world. Our team wants to change the world. Our collaborators want to change the world. We want to do our little bit for it to really move healthcare to a different place. So collaborations help you do that. So take chances and risks, but you have to also be a little bit wise. This was the beginnings of the ACBRI, which is the academic wing here at Cedars, and move to the next evolution. And for me, we're working on diagnostics, but to me, we don't address personalized therapy. So our next big move now is to mechanistic and individualized therapies. Completely different groups of collaborators. No, I shouldn't say completely different. There are overlap in the collaborators, different teams, different goals, and that's to use iPSC-derived organoids from patients to drive both therapeutics development, but also ultimately as a clinical tool to be able to figure out what drug's best for you. And so this is not going to be done tomorrow. It is our next long-term goal, and we're working on the technology, on the bioinformatics behind it to be able to make it so that we can run, let's say, 100 different patients, iPSC-derived motor neurons in a 96 well plates, or 96 patients, one time point, put it through the mass spec, or have one individuals with 96 different perturbations through the system, moving science to, and this idea of personalizing your therapy based on not just looking at, one cell line, but many, so we get the genetic background, is really our big move. And other people too. I mean, this is not novel to us. It's just our big push. So we're trying to develop within Cedars an IPS biobank. This is with Clive Svensson, a whole bunch of other people in IBD, that every person coming into the hospital system, maybe ultimately we would have iPSCs, we could drive them and start to really move science and individualized therapy. This is our move now. Just two last slides. Through this all, you can't forget about your family, your friends, the things that make you happy. When I started science, this was not part of the scheme. You were not allowed to do it. I was a woman. This was, first of all, very unusual. Two, I had children, also unusual. Now I am so grateful that this is much more accepted, much more for both male and females, or whatever gender, along the gender schema you are, that you are allowed to have a life. You're allowed to have more than just being in the lab all the time. This is, I think, will create a much better scientist, much better way of doing things. It helps you to keep life in perspective. And with that, I think you leap science more when it's not just about you. So here's some references of stuff I pulled from the internet and things I learned about. So I just want to say thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much for this very inspiring talk. Before we start with the questions, I'd like to thank you for your honesty. I'd like to thank you that you let us in on your visions. I think those are the talks that we really need to see as young scientists that can actually change our own approach to things. I'd like to remind all the viewers that you can still write some questions to me. I already got some, but I'd like to start with two of my own, and then I will get to the visitors, the watcher questions. So first of all, you told me that in collaborations, you have as a last step to go down to the very professional, the business kind of step to keep it going. Have you ever had, or is there an example of a really dear to your heart collaboration that in the end didn't work out no matter how hard you tried?
Yeah, probably two. And probably they're still hard to talk about because, you know, I think the reason why they don't work, I think if you always talk about regrets, normally it's about, for me at least, it's about a person. And people always tell me I have to grow up and not think that way. And I keep thinking, yeah, I'm not too sure I can grow up and not think that way. So I think there's two that I learned about. One was a young scientist who came highly recommended, and they had a very hard time adjusting to the US and adjusting to their role for many reasons. And I think ultimately that person had to just change their life. There was nothing in the science that we could do to help support it. It was just, for many reasons, just a very hard time. And they had to find themselves. And science can't give you yourself. You have to find yourself. You have to find out what makes you excited. And it's okay that it's not science, or it's okay it's not wet lab, but you still have to find it. And sometimes if you've invested so much along a route, and society's saying you have to go down that route, it's hard when it's just not right. And I think those are the ones that are hard. The good part of that story is that ultimately they usually find their way, and they usually turn out to have this great, wonderful life. And I think that's the part that I always have to hold on to, even if it looks really hard right now, that usually it all works out. And it's better that you just acknowledge it and move on, and support them in a different way. The other one, I think, which was hard and still remains hard a little bit, is around the company that we started when I was an assistant professor. So at that time, people didn't have companies, but I needed a mass spectrometer, so I started a company around heart failure. And at one point, we had like, I don't know, 8 or 10 employees, and it collapsed. It was way ahead of its time, and I learned a lot along the way. But I do feel the conflicts that arose around that, and around IP, and around money and like that. I wish I had knew better, and maybe would have held it differently now. And that's actually now when I have to deal with IP and things like that, that I understand a little bit better. That's better to be handled as a professional with no emotion, that it is a route forward and you're doing it for certain reasons, and understand how that works. But yeah, there's always regrets in life, but also more often the most wonderful things that happens. And sometimes in collaborations, when they collapse, I go, or something happens and you think, oh, someone just took advantage of us again, I should learn. But then I will always take the chance, because 99.999% of the times you take a chance that something wonderful happens. And that 0.1% when it doesn't, can't make you not take those chances. So maybe I didn't quite answer your question, but
I actually like your super positive approach to those things. I really can learn a lot from that, I think. Maybe another question from my side. You take things very positively, but also in terms of collaboration. Have you ever had a situation where you yourself thought this collaboration is not going to work out, but in the end you made something beautiful?
Yeah, that's a great question. Trying to think of an example where that would be. More often than not, they don't. If you have an inkling, I mean, you can get it so it gets through and the paper gets done, and then the collaboration just doesn't continue to do it. But I'm trying to think of a situation where kind of so we can work through a situation and get that project done. But like I said, it's really hard, these long-term collaborations, and they do also go in and out. Like a great friend of mine, Anne Murphy, she cloned cardiac troponin I was the first person. She's a pediatric cardiologist I learned a lot from. We worked together on and off a lot. And, there was times we'd have several grants together, and other times we have none. And so things do kind of flow, but I always know she has my back. So to me, she's a collaboration superstar, because I know she always has my back. If I, you know, if there comes a point I need help on something, I know I can ask her. Other collaborations, I can only ask that within the collaboration, right? So that's why this kind of long-term relationships, they are rare, and they also develop, and sometimes they're not just from your past. Sometimes you have collaborations and friends you get later on in your life that you go, oh, who'd have thought of that one? But because of where you are in your life and situations, you're more likely to do it. So I don't have any, I think I can always save a collaboration to usually get things done unless something really bad happens, but they may not turn out to be a collaboration for very long.
I see. Thank you. Thank you very much. There was a question from somebody, I take it is from India. And the question was actually, do you have any tips on how somebody who would actually like to make a change, but can only do so remotely? Have you ever had this kind of collaboration?
Yeah, so I think that's one of the big benefits of today versus when I started, you know, whatever, 25 years ago. There, unless they were down the hall, it was harder to collaborate. But I think now that is not true. I think initially collaborations are nicer if they're together. So we often have people come to the lab, trainees for a while, so they get to know people, you get to know their personalities. It's not so much about trading skills, it's about learning personality. So when you're on a conference call, if someone's doing something weird, or you know, you understand where that's coming from, right? Because you know them a little bit. So I think face-to-face knowing someone helps in the collaboration. But I think remote collaboration certainly, I mean, I collaborate with people from all over the world, and we make that relationship happen all kinds. So sometimes it's just sending samples and we do it, and other times we spend time getting to understand each other a little bit more. And sometimes it's just more of a service, right? So we have, so if you're in India, one is you have some great proteomics people in India to work with. Some of it is you don't necessarily need to be just a proteomics group. Maybe you need to make the collaboration with the physiologist or the clinical person. And with respect to doing it internationally, there is, everyone, I think, in science should help everyone. It doesn't matter where you're from. So you need to reach out and find those individuals. And if someone says, oh, I'm too busy, I can't, it's okay. Find someone else. There's lots of people in this world who believe in science and believe in collaboration. So if someone says no, don't take it personally. Just ask someone else, and figure out who you need. You're not looking for someone to tell you what to do. You know what you have to do. That's you. What you need to find is those people who are going to help hone what you want to do, make it better vision, who can help you work on that vision, and or someone who has a synergistic vision that you can help them. And that just takes time. There's no, and that's why groups like this is really important, right? That's how you get to know people, right? Who are not just down the hall from you.
That's fantastic advice, I think. One more question here is that what would you do if you found out that your collaborators do not share the same scientific standards as you in terms of data analysis, whom to include as authors, and so on?
Yeah, those are always tricky. And I know some people say, well, you should write down who's going to be authors at the beginning and keep that order. And I say, well, papers always evolve. And so you can do that, but it's not always right at the end, right? That can change depending on a whole bunch of circumstances. So I think data transparency is really important. People talk about data not being reproducible. I worry about these big studies where everyone's kind of doing their little part, that you can have a misunderstanding and for no intention at all have something wrong be percolated across everything because people don't understand where the data moves together. So you see that with proteomics a lot. People coming in from genomics assume certain things about proteomics data and vice versa, right? Around accuracy. So I think collaborations where we like to share our data so it goes up. So we're willing to teach people to analyze our data if they want to in our collaborations. Often they don't, but we try to get them to do it. So what you can do is you try to create an environment where that won't become a problem, right? So you try to make it that saying, oh, my data is going to be up in the shared drive. Why don't you put your data up in the shared drive? So how do you get that, analyze that? And I think when there's clear, so I think there's a difference between a lack of transparency that I think you can get around. You can learn to analyze their data. Say, oh, I've always wanted to learn how to do that. Can you show me how to do that data? How did you do that? Versus where you think there's been fraud. If there's been fraud, that's not to be dealt with at a local level. That there, your institution, this is really important. That is an institutional issue, and there is usually it's a VP of research that has to deal with fraud or allegations of misconduct, and that's something very different. If it's just a transparency or a mistake, then that needs to be sorted out locally. But if it is, if you're worried that there's fraud, it's an allegation, and there's just a process to be done. So I think if my advice is to always in every collaboration, make your own data transparent, offer to show people how you did the data analysis, show examples when you're doing your lab meeting. Oh, this is how I did it. Not every detail, but show them. Ask to analyze their data because you want to learn. Make an environment where this can happen. Now you could say, well, I'm just a graduate student, how I can do it? Well, that's exactly where it has to start. It's harder for a PI to make that happen. We can demand it, but we can't make you do it. As a graduate student, you have the power to make this happen. Transparency around your own data, questioning your own data, saying, I was worried about this part, but this is what I thought about it. Create that environment. That is your power. You're developing, you're creating the data, and you get to set that tone. The PI can help support that and to create it. So in our lab, we try to make that part of the environment. But I'm not generating the data. I can go through your data. I can make someone else go through your data. But you can create that in a very honest and open way that's not confrontational. And that would be my suggestion, is to just try to have that in place. And now if it's happening, then to try to make it happen.
Thanks so much. People are really interested in your opinion here. So I've got two more questions if you have the time.
Sure.
So one question is, what would your first warning be of a failing collaboration or a struggling collaboration?
Yeah, usually it's two things. One is someone in your lab group or someone in your local group, we've decided to do something. We've all agreed on it, and all of a sudden it's not getting done. So either that's because they're super busy and something else has come up that they prioritized, or there's an issue that they don't want to do it for something. And usually sometimes that something is that something's not good with the collaboration. So that's usually a warning sign, is that the timing's not quite working right. It's been deprioritized even when everyone agreed that it was a priority. Now, there's other reasons that can happen. You know, the kids are sick at home. So you have to make sure it's none of those things. So that's usually one instance. And then usually the other one is, you know, people are acting weird. They're they're irritable when they're not normally. They usually chatty and all of a sudden they're not chatty. Those types of things, and that's again my strength is this emotional intelligence. Other people it could be something else, but it's something out of the ordinary. Now that's excluding anything like all of a sudden someone runs into your office and they're yelling at you, or you know, all those other types of things where it's really exploded. But usually those are the first sign. At that point, it's usually solvable. It's just about usually communication and expectation, and having an honest, just, you know, so it's something going on at home, or just, you know, give someone a break, it will be fine. Usually those situations can be solved, and you want to catch them and show that humanity so that you can get things organized. And usually if it's just because they're overwhelmed with other stuff, it's just prioritizing them, giving them the resources, or shifting your expectations or the team's expectations to allow things to resolve. So a great question.
So I think also in terms of then, if you maybe lack this emotional insight into other people, to be also honest on a private level. So if you really have issues.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I think science, certainly when I was growing up, and I'd say even now, you're expected to be, I don't know, like this little robot and not have feelings. And when I was the only woman, or very, very few women in my field growing up, and I would be like this graduate student going to our big meetings, and I had kids, and I would put baby pictures up on the thing because I wanted them to know I have a kid. I am a woman, I have a kid, and I'm a graduate student. Live with it. And not that I said it that forcefully. It was my subtle way of, and people got to know, and they would, all of a sudden they would tell me about their kids. And so I think that vulnerability is part of life, right? I mean, I think we're all vulnerable. And I think asking questions is the other thing. Some people don't like to ask questions because, oh, we're all supposed to know these answers. Of course we don't. Of course we don't. And I think for me, that was the other part I had to learn, is that it's great to ask questions. I don't always ask questions, but it's always good to ask questions. If you don't know, you don't know. You know lots of other stuff. Just don't know. And maybe you forgot something. Happens to me all the time now. As you get older, it's okay. It's like this part of being human and being a scientist. And I think that's evolving much more than when I grew up, where, it was much more hierarchical, let's say.
Okay,
much better.
Thank you so much. I would like, time-wise, we are already over. So maybe one last question that I got a few minutes ago. Not really in terms of collaboration, but generally, what would you tell ECRs who would like to, in the end, start their own group? What would be your tips to get it going? Where would you start?
Yeah, so I think whether or not that's an industry with your own group, or whether or not you're talking about academics, having your own lab, or being a group leader in a lab, I think there's two things I would say. One is perseverance around your own vision and what you need to do. I think the other one is to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, who are civil, who are good people in their hearts. Find the people who complement you, complement the tools you have, bring in those expertise around you, and make a team where they're going to be the best they can be. Because if they're the best, then you're going to be your best. So make it about building your team about them. And that's true whether or not it's, at whatever level, wherever you're doing it. And then I'd say the third one is build your dream. My dreams change. The essence of my dream has not changed from the very beginning, but the dream itself has changed. How it manifests has changed. And I think finding that, and you could say, well, I don't have a master vision yet. Of course not. You're going to grow that, but don't be afraid to figure out what that is and what that means once you have that vision. What does it mean if you're serious that your science is going to change something? Then how do you do that? What does it mean? You have to become a business person? Well, then find out, or find a business partner. Does that mean that you're going to have to learn another tool? Or what does it mean? And you could say, well, maybe I can't travel because my family's here, I can't move. That's fine. Make your dream adapt to that environment. That's your destiny, that's your control. And surrounded by the people who are like-minded and bring out the best in them. That's my advice. Make it about them.
Thank you so much. That was all. Thank you
Excellent.
again for helping YPIC and helping young scientists. It was very inspirational. I loved it, and I feel many others did as well. Thank you so much.
It was my absolute pleasure, and best of luck to each one of you. And maybe that's not the right saying, because just grab your luck and spread it around.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a nice day, all of you.
You as well. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
My pleasure.